The Green Communities Division, as you may know, is the center kind of clearinghouse for all energy matters for all cities and towns in Massachusetts, including our 136 designated green communities, but also for all other cities and towns in the Commonwealth. So we have got 4 regional coordinators that each of them are responsible for 4 broad regional geographic areas of the state, and they can help you with whatever type of energy issue or idea you have. If you don't already know who they are, please take this information down, and actually it's a good opportunity for me to tell you that we can, you can take a picture of any of these screens as we go through. There's a camera icon in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, so you can do a screenshot of any of these slides along the way. So the Green Communities Division has many different types of technical assistance, grant programs, other things we can do to assist you. I'm not going to run through all of them in the interest of time. I would draw your attention to the bottom of this slide. Make sure you check our website often for various tools and resources that are posted there periodically, and we do about twice a month an e-blast to our list that has some very topical things that are coming up, and if you have not already signed up for those, make sure that you do that. We are recording, and we will have this the recorded slides as well as the slides themselves posted on our website within about 48 hours. We're also we'll post a Q&A in about 2 weeks. During the presentation, in addition to the camera icon, there's an icon in the upper right-hand corner of your screen where you can raise your virtual hand and ask a question. We'll get to as many of those questions live at the end of the presentation as we can, and I think if our guests are able, we'll stay a few extra minutes to do as many of those as we can today. And then we will post a full Q&A on our website, as I said, within a couple of weeks. So with that, we are going to start with the poll question. We'll have a few of these sprinkled through the presentation today. So I'm going to turn it back over to Charlie, who has miraculously gotten us back online here, to ask the first poll question.
Okay, so the question is, who's in our audience today? Are you a municipality or public entity, a nonprofit, or a homeowner? I don't know if you're able to vote on this one because we started it already when the system crashed. So if you want to, in your questions box, just put in one of those, indicate one of those, and we can use the information regardless. Okay. With that, we'll take it back to you, Lisa.
Okay. So I'm going to, I think, first of all, turn it over to Justin Brandt from the Department of Public Utilities, one of our sister agencies within the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. And then after Justin, we will turn it over to Catherine Moses from the City of Lowell, which is one of our green communities. The right slide here, and then we'll hand the reins to Justin.
Great.
Okay, here we go.
Well, thanks for bearing with us, everybody. I think it's actually back one slide. So I'll try to keep it brief so we still have some time for questions at the end. To start, as many of you are probably aware, our electric bills are split into 2 parts, what we call delivery and supply. And this is a result of the restructuring of the electric industry that happened in the late 90s. So the delivery portion is the cost to maintain the electric grid and deliver power from where it's produced to where it's consumed. This is still a monopoly service. You're required to take it from your local distribution company, and the rates that are charged for delivery service are regulated by the Department of Public Utilities. With restructuring, the utilities used to own generation as well, and they no longer do. So the supply portion of your bill is the cost to generate electricity, and that is the it's a competitive product. Customers may choose to buy from any number of licensed competitive suppliers. For those who don't choose to take supply from a competitive supplier, the distribution company procures it on your behalf in a product we call basic service. And the Department of Public Utilities regulates competitive suppliers, mostly in that they have the technical and financial capabilities to serve this role, as well as some consumer protection, but the rates they charge and the products they offer are up to their discretion. So to focus in on the distribution part of your bill, which is the complicated one, there's a number of different types of charges on the bill. The largest single component is what we call base distribution rates, and this is the majority of costs necessary to maintain and run the poles and wires of the system. And those are established during a rate case, which is a big adjudicatory proceeding before my department. And at this point, rate cases for each company have to happen at least every 5 years, though that's a recent result of 2012 legislation. And once rate charges are put into effect during a rate case, they remain in effect until the next rate case, so for up to 5 years. In addition to base rates that are established in this way, there are a number of other charges that make up the total delivery charge or distribution charge. There are some fixed charges that were established by the legislature, most notably something we call the system benefits charge, which is early funding for energy efficiency as well as funding for incentives to build renewable energy. In addition, on your bill, you'll see charges for transmission. This is to maintain the transmission system, the large wires that move power longer distances between states and within states. The cost of transmission is regulated by the federal government, and ISO New England, and those costs would be passed through to customers on their electric bill. There's also something we call the transition charge, and this is sort of a relic of restructuring. It's to reimburse the utilities for past investments they may have made in power plants. And even though we're almost 20 years into restructuring, the transition charge remains on your bill. For most companies at this point, it's actually a credit. You're getting money back that was sort of overpaid in the past, but it's sort of a relic of restructuring. And then in addition, more and more we're seeing various reconciling mechanisms. And these are certain costs that are recovered outside of base rates. And they generally fall into two categories. The traditional one would be costs that fluctuate based on markets, so they're hard to predict ahead of time, and as a result, they're very hard to set prospectively for base rates. Things like pensions, which can vary based on the market, or fuel costs, or storm responses, sort of costs that are hard to predict ahead of time. And those are collected outside of base rates as a way to basically insulate the utility from market fluctuations. And then in addition, a number of state policy objectives are also recovered through reconciling mechanisms such as energy efficiency, net metering, low-income customer discounts, and things like that. So to recover all of these charges on your bill, there's three basic mechanisms. The first is what we call a customer charge. This is a fixed monthly charge. In theory, it's used to recover fixed expenses like the meters and billing systems that the utility maintains. For each customer, the cost of those systems doesn't vary depending on how much electricity used. And as a result, those costs would be recovered through a fixed charge on all customers. In addition, the majority of costs for smaller customers are recovered through volumetric charges. And these are charges per kilowatt hour of energy used. So the more electricity you use, the more you pay in a volumetric charge. For medium and large commercial customers, their costs can also be recovered through what we call a demand charge. And this is based on the most power you use in an instantaneous or in a 15-minute period over the course of a month. Demand charges were implemented for customer classes where there's fairly heterogeneous energy usage. So if you think about the electric system, we need to build poles and wires and maintain power plants to serve the sort of 1 minute or 15 minutes of peak usage. So if customers, even if a certain customer is using significantly more power, even if it's only over a short period of time, the grid still needs to be built to maintain and serve that load. So as a result, demand charges are thought to be a more equitable way of recovering costs for larger customers. So I guess if I've alluded to the makeup of these different charges and the rates that you pay are dependent on the customer class that the account falls into. Unfortunately, for commercial and industrial customers, there's no fixed definition among all the distribution companies throughout the state. So the amount of usage that qualifies you as a small, medium, or a large commercial customer varies by your distribution company. You can find your customer class on your bill. And depending on your customer class and your utility, the charges you face may vary either by season or by time of day. So again, for larger customers, there's usually winter and summer rates and potentially on-peak and off-peak rates depending on when usage occurs. And I just add that for most municipal operations, I assume they fall in what we call the G1 or the G2 customer classes, which are small or medium-sized businesses. So to really break down the nitty-gritty, this is an example bill from a hypothetical national grid small business G1 customer with an average usage in that class. So it's about 1,200 kilowatt hours per month. So I'm not going to walk through every piece of it. I guess the highlights are on the first line. You can see the customer charge. For this class, it's $10. So whether you use 1 kilowatt hour or 10,000 in this customer class, you'd get a $10 charge. And then the rest of the charges in this class are volumetric, are based on your usage. The distribution charge is base rates, and as you can see, that's the largest single charge within delivery service, followed by transmission, which is a charge that's not regulated by my department, but it is regulated federally. And then in addition to those, there's a number of reconciling factors or small fixed charges that make up the rest of the delivery portion of the bill. And then the last line is basic service. So that's the supply portion for a customer that gets supply from their distribution company. We usually say for most classes, supply is about half and delivery is about half of your bill, and that's sort of the case in this hypothetical example. Just to look a little over time, this is for a residential customer, looking at how bills have fluctuated over the last 10 years. This is an average M-star residential customer. I guess the big takeaway from this graph, so the top sort of gray color would be basic service. That's the supply portion of your bill. And as you can see, that fluctuates fairly greatly based on market conditions. These are the conditions in the wholesale market where supply is procured change, and as a result, prices change potentially fairly dramatically, as we saw this last winter. And then all the pieces, all the rest of the categories are the delivery portion of the bill, whether it's base rates or customer charge or what's called other programs, is essentially all of the reconciling mechanisms. And as you can see, those charges, well, the category they fall into has changed a bit over the last 10 years. In general, it's remained relatively flat over the time period. And a big driver of that is NSTAR, who this is an example of. They haven't had a rate case in the last 10 years. So their base rates, as you can see from this graph, have remained flat over that time. So to focus a little on the basic supply portion of the bill, talk later. If you don't take supply from a competitive supplier, you're on what we call basic service. All customers have a choice of a basic service price that either varies each month or is fixed. For medium and large C&I customers, this price, if you're on the fixed price, it changes every 3 months. For residential customers, if you're on a fixed price, it changes every 6 months. And the way that the distribution companies procure those contracts to serve that load varies by customer class. And I'm happy to get into it if folks have questions, but I think I'll skip over this one and try to move through things. So recently had what we called bill recalculation, and that's if a customer was on a fixed price basic service contract and they switched to a competitive supplier during the term of that contract, so within the, for residential customers, 6-month period where prices remain fixed, they would have had their bills recalculated after this switch as if they had been on the monthly variable price. And the reasoning behind that is that the fixed price basic service is a weighted average of the monthly variable prices, and the utilities are paying the monthly price to procure that load. But given this was seen as a penalty for switching a competitive supplier, so the department recently eliminated this provision for residential and small commercial customers. And I'll walk through an example on the next slide because I think it's much easier to see this when you're looking at the numbers. I guess I will say one area where we're still thinking about is when we proposed eliminating the bill recalculation, it was brought to our attention that for municipal aggregations where all of the residential and small customers, or the majority of them within a municipality, would be switched to competitive supply, that looks more like a large C&I customer just in terms of the amount of load, and is because there is a lot of thought and effort going into a municipal aggregation. They sort of could dramatically influence basic service prices if they were to switch in the middle of a basic service term. So the department proposed potentially keeping bill recalculation for municipal aggregations, and we took comments on June 5th and are currently trying to figure out what the next steps are. So a quick example of what a bill recalculation looks like, or what this policy is. So in the first line, you'll see that's the fixed price over the 6-month period for small commercial customers. And that is a weighted average of the second line, which is the monthly variable prices. So you see that prices in this term, this is from this past winter, are higher in January and February, and then lower in March, April, and May. And so the fixed price ends up being lower than the monthly variable price during the first 2 months and higher during the second. So in this hypothetical, it assumes a customer would use the same amount of power every month, and as a result, their fixed price supply bill would be the same every month. But if you look at the variable bill, it would have been higher in January and February and lower in the other months. So you could imagine if a customer were to leave basic service on March 1st, the utility would have been paying more to procure the power that a customer used than the customer paid, because they would have made up that sort of under recovery over the ensuing months. So, basically the bottom line is the amount that your bill recalculation would have been if you switched on the first of the following month. So if you switched on February 1st, your bill would have been recalculated for January, and it would have been an additional $32. In February, that goes to $60, and then throughout the rest of the term, the calculation gets smaller as the rates are below the fixed price rate, and that sort of recalculation is recouped. But as I said, this provision no longer exists for small C&I customers and residential customers. So I guess last I was asked to talk a little about ways you can reduce your electric bill. There are some ways that impact both the supply and the distribution portion of the bill, and some that would only impact one. So as you'll hear from the next speaker, renewable energy is a way to save on both supply and distribution, as well as energy efficiency, assuming that these are volumetric charges. On the delivery side, as you reduce energy, you reduce both your supply and your distribution portion. In addition, on the supply side, by getting power in the competitive market instead of through basic service, you may be able to save money, though that all depends on the competitive product that you sign up for. On the distribution side, if you have a demand charge or a demand portion of your bill, there are many options on how to reduce demand and follow your demand, and there's a number of third-party companies that are providing those services. And I guess one to add that I think is specific to municipal customers that may have lots of accounts is making sure that you're removing inactive accounts and staying on top of that, because as you see, the customer charge, even if a account does not use any energy, you're still going to pay that every month for all of your accounts. So I think with that, I will pass it on to Catherine.
Okay. First we have a poll question.
Oh, sorry about that.
So before we move on, we've got one more poll question. Okay, so are you using a competitive service now supplier or a basic service supplier? Please check one. Okay, with about 60% of the votes in, 81% are competitive services and 19% are using basic service.
Okay, on to Catherine.
So one of the things that Justin had mentioned in the last slide was a way that you can decrease both the supply portion and the delivery portion of your bill is through solar. So that's what my portion of the webinar is going to focus on. Energy produced from solar panels can actually reduce your electricity bills in several ways. You can do a direct install of solar on your facilities, which reduces the number of kilowatt hours you're charged for. You can do net metering. If there are excess solar produced, you can get a monetary credit for that. And in virtual net metering, the credit that you get can actually be in an off-site location, not directly tied to your facility. What I'm going to focus on is talking a little bit about understanding virtual net metering credits on your bills, where you find the net metering credits, how you track them, and different ways that you can allocate them. So first, let's talk about the benefits of the net metering credits. The City of Lowell developed 3 large sites that generate these credits for a total of 8.5 megawatts. One of them is on the closed city landfill, and 2 are in fields in western Massachusetts. And since October of 2013, we've added over 11 million kilowatt hours of renewable energy to the grid. The city saved over $350,000 on utility bills, and this has also helped us to mitigate the fiscal impact of a rate increase from one of our competitive suppliers. And just to highlight how amazing net metering credits can be, there's one particular account on the next slide that's sort of a success story for us. Real savings. At our wastewater treatment plant in 2014, it consumed over 7.6 million kilowatt hours and costs of over $890,000. But over a 15-month period, through allocation of net metering credits, there were savings of over $152,000. So it's one of the things that really has helped the city to manage its costs of electricity. So where do you find your net metering credits on your bill? They're generally listed after the supply portion of your bill under other adjustments and charges. And you'll see that it's highlighted. It's usually shown as a negative, showing that it's a credit. And depending on what your allocations are, that may be a small number or a large number. So then the question is, okay, so it's showing up on my bill. How do I track those kinds of credits? There's the easy way through your solar developer and the harder way that you can use utility account comparisons. We'll just talk briefly about each of these. So the easy way. Most solar developers will, upon request, track your utility bills and include copies on your invoicing. And this is nice because it actually allows you to see when the credits showed up on your bills and what you're being charged for, so you're sure that it's being the right amount that you're being charged for, that you're actually getting the credits, and you can see how they're working on your bills. But if developers are unwilling to track your credits, you can also use a utility bill analysis to track them yourself. It's a three-step process where first you look at the bill of the solar facility, you compare that bill to the bill of your solar developer, and then you compare individual bills to your Schedule Z allocations with the solar developer's bill. So step one, look at the bill for your solar facility. You should receive, if you're the host customer for a solar facility, a bill for that particular site, that particular meter. And at the top of your bill, it tends to list it as code gen. And from this, you can determine the actual number of net metering credits that will be allocated to your bills during the month. You'll notice that it's showing a large credit, in this case over $31,000 in credits. So you start with that, and then on step two, you can compare that bill with the bill your solar developer gets you. I've included just a small snapshot of the bills that we get from our solar developer, and I can see that what is showing up on the actual meter itself from the utility is the same amount that is being shown as credits transferred from the solar developer. So far, so good. Then you have step three of this process, where you compare the individual bills in your Schedule Z with the solar developer's bills. And in the example that I used here, for the particular meter we're looking at, 100% of the credits were allocated to a single account. And you can see in the credits and adjustments that the $31,000 in credits are the same thing that's on our developer's bill. So we're good there as well.
Okay, so we'll go to another poll question, Charlie. I think this is our last one.
Our last poll question. So how do you track your net metering credits? So the developer tracks the net metering credits. We track our net metering credits internally, not sure. And additional assistance in tracking would be helpful. So you can actually check off more than one box in this particular poll. Okay, with seems like the voting is done. We've got 27% said solar developers track the net metering credits. 36% say they track them themselves. 36% are not sure, and 33% of folks would like to see additional assistance in tracking.
That's helpful for the Green Communities Division to know going forward. So we're looking at ways to target our. Back to you, Catherine.
All right. So we'll talk a little bit about how we track it in Lowell and how we come up with allocations for our net metering credit agreements. In the previous slide, I referenced the Schedule Z. And for anybody that might be unfamiliar with the Schedule Z, this is how you tell your utility which accounts you want your solar net metering credits to be applied to. It asks you to identify a percentage of the credits generated that will go to a particular account. It has to be completed for each meter, and for some of the really large facilities, there may be multiple meters. One of our fields, one of our 3.5 megawatt fields, for example, has 3 different meters to allocate credits from. And just know that these can be changed twice a year. So just for basics again, you can either allocate 100% of the credits into a single large account. We saw an example of that previously when I was talking about tracking your bills. You can give moderate percentages to a few of the larger accounts. You can do smaller percentages to a large number of accounts, or you can allow credits to build up in your host customer account. Your solar facility size, customer savings goals, and the discount that your developer gives you can all play a part in this. One of the things that the City of Lowell has recently done is updated our Schedule Zs to allow for a larger number of accounts to actually be covered by credits. And I'll tell you a little bit how we went about doing that. And just to be respectful on time, I'll try to just go through these fairly quickly. It's pretty detailed on the slides themselves, and I'd be happy to field any questions afterwards as well. So you want to start with your historical data for all electricity accounts. Look and see what you've used either from MEI, internal records, your utility records. Make sure that you factor in any known cost increase. If you have a competitive supplier rate that's going to expire, make sure that you factor in an increase. Look at the fiscal impact of that. I usually like to assume less than 100% of the cost will be covered by the credits, and this allows for efficiency differences. It keeps you from over-allocating credits, and it allows also for variations in usage. You can use whatever percentage you'd like, but we just try to be conservative with 95%. And then also make sure that you're looking at any energy-saving projects that might be coming up in the next 6 months or so. Are you doing LED retrofits? Do you have a green community grant that will produce savings? You want to make sure that those savings are captured or factored in allocations of credits. Then you can project the output of your net metering credits. You can either use historical data if you've had facilities for a while, or you can look at guaranteed outputs and projections from your solar developers. You can determine allocation percentages through a simple Excel file, and then fill out your Schedule Z with the percentages noted and monitor the costs every 6 months or so. Some tips and considerations in filling out your Schedule Z is make sure you factor in any off-bill competitive supply. Some competitive suppliers will actually bill you separately for the supply costs, and those costs cannot be included over net metering credits because it's only what's on your distribution portion of the bill. It's only what your National Grid, your Eversource, or whatever your utility is. They're the ones that apply the credits. So if you have off-bill accounts, make sure you take those costs out. And remember that solar is an intermittent resource. There'll be variations by season, by weather, by snow coverage, and you may have a situation in the summer where you have more credits than your actual bill costs. Don't worry about that. It'll wind down in the winter when you have 10 feet of snow on your panels, like we did last February. And if you do find that there are over-allocations, again, you can change your Schedule Zs twice a year and adjust for that.
Okay. Excuse me. Thanks very much, Catherine, and thank you, Justin, for that informative presentation. We do have time to take a few questions. We have some here, and then we can say whatever we don't get to, we will go ahead and answer them online later on. So on the there's a question here that says, on the on-bill example, what is the RES-assist.abj? That's for you, Justin.
So that's the low-income discount, the residential assistance budget for allocation. So that's the discount that low-income customers receive is recovered from all other customers, I believe.
Okay. We have a question here, and again, if, we'll throw these out, and if we need to take some more time to do a written response, we can do that. So how do you reconcile accounts if the solar developer bill is by calendar month, but the utility bill is mid-month? So kilowatt hours different due to the different billing periods, starting and ending at different times.
I think one of the things, it depends on your solar developer, but there are some developers out there that actually will give you a link to a website where you can look at the kilowatt hour usage, and you can kind of match that up. But there may be developers that don't do that, and so I'm not really sure what to recommend in that case.
Okay, maybe see if the developer would
willing
adjust
to,
it.
yeah,
I don't know.
to show you where the production is.
We have another one here. If we have credits built up over time, can we adjust Schedule Z to allocate those existing credits to other accounts? Or does the Schedule Z adjustment only affect future credits?
The credits. So you could stop allocating to that account, and over time, if they use energy, it will wind down. I think there are certain instances where you may be able to get a cash out from distribution company if you have a large amount of credits on one account, but for the most part, it's just future credit.
Okay. So we'll do one more question, and then I think we'll wrap it up. Some suppliers are willing to consolidate the supply charges on the utility bill for a fee, which also needs to be factored in if you ask them to do that in order to accommodate the net metering credits. I know that's more of a statement, but I don't know if anybody wants to kind of react to that, or is that something that comments?
Yeah, I mean, that interests me. I don't think it shouldn't cost your supplier anything to bill you through the distribution company. I guess there may be a lag in them recovering their money, but you know, I guess that would be an issue you would have to discuss with your competitive supplier.
We actually just moved a number of our off-bill competitive supply to on-bill, and we didn't get any extra charges for that. So I would recommend reading your agreement with your competitive supplier and make sure that that was part of the agreement, because it may just be something they're doing extra.
Okay. All right. So with that, I again want to thank Catherine and Justin, as well as Emma Kraus and Charlie Tuttle from the Green Communities Division, for helping out today. It was a bit of a challenge, and thank you all for your patience. And we soldiered through it in the end. So enjoy the rest of your day, and look for. We'll be doing, as you may know, we do webinars about once a month, but we take off the summer months. We don't do them in July and August. So we will be back to you with another schedule of webinars starting in September. Thank you.